Okay, here we are with another WeatherXM update, this time with Thanos. Thanos, let's start before we get to what you do. Is how long have you been at WeatherXM?
Well, hi, Nick. um, so I started working here in September 2022. So that's a year and a half almost now.
Okay, so a year and a half. So about as long, a little bit less long than the project has been around. But what did you originally get hired for? Because you were working with them before, right?
Yeah, we were working together in IoT projects before WeatherXM
Mm-hmm.
started. And at some point, I got hired in a business development role. And the objective primarily was to help grow the network. And I took over some tasks around B2C retail and our shop, marketing, and how to grow the community. And
Yep.
I would say even more, I worked on B2B collaborations, like creating strong partnerships with companies around the world that can sell weather stations in bigger quantities. And I'm really happy to say that today we have 11 resellers, distributors, and
Yep.
more than 20 affiliates that really help
Yeah.
us grow the network. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't get to see all the affiliate numbers, but one of them wrote to me and was asking me a couple things. He's like, "Hey, I've sold whatever the thousands of dollars worth of weather stations so far." I was like, "Wow, the affiliates really, really help out." So it's cool that you're
Yeah, they're
managing
welcome.
that. We'll get to what you do now at WeatherXM in a second. But let's talk about what the biggest challenges have been so far as from the time you started, going through everything so far and where we are now. What have been the big challenges?
Yeah, I would say the first challenge is more on the organization part, the operational part. Like, how do you get the teams work together in such a complex project? Because it's not just scaling a team from 6 people to 30, which happens with every startup, that gets funding. But here things are a bit different too, because the project has many moving parts, from hardware, Web3 and blockchain development, backend, weather science. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of things that go on at the same time. So it's really hard to pick up your battles and set up priorities. And I would say that has been quite a challenge so far. And the second one, our first objective with starting the project was around this time to prove that we're able to run a network like that we're capable of setting this up and making it technically work. And we have proved that at the stage we are. We have our mechanisms in place, our QOD working. And if you compare WeatherXM to other, let's say, crowdsourcing networks and weather networks around the world,
Yep.
There's a big difference here, because our reward mechanism helps to keep the quality of the data really high. And we are the only network that does this kind of work right now.
Yeah. And I think Stavros talked about that in one of the last videos we did. He went into a lot of detail. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check that out about what really makes WeatherXM different. Because I know we've had a couple of things on Discord like, oh, it's the same as everything else. Like, no. There's huge differences in the quality of data produced. Okay, so those are the challenges. And what do you do at WeatherXM now? You kind of got brought in for one thing and that transmogrified into something else. What do they call you now?
Yeah, we're agile. We're agile. We're moving
Yeah.
fast here. So, like a month ago, I took on the role of Chief Operating Officer, which means
Mm-hmm.
I work more horizontally with all the teams and try to help with strategy, planning, execution, relating more to the first challenge that I mentioned. So I'm working more on the operating side now, as we're building a new business team as we speak.
Yeah. No, it's like the call before this one and the call after this one are all you building stuff. So I appreciate it carving out the time. Let's talk a little bit then about what are the next steps on the business side that are getting you excited, that you're super pumped about.
Well, we're entering a very important phase of the project, which is showcasing the value the data being produced by this network. And the last year we did a lot of work with pilots, and we worked closely on use cases, how to solve real problems. And we had to set up a strategy, and that's what we did the last year. And now we are ready. We have learned a lot, and I can share with you that this strategy has 3 pillars, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is that we will very soon start building our revenue on the hyperlocal advantage, like I call it this way.
Yep.
We can set up networks in specific places and solve specific problems in some verticals.
Yep.
The verticals we chose are agriculture on one hand, where we see a lot of interest in helping with our forecasting in crop management and disease management.
Yep.
The second one is relating to the energy industry. There are some really interesting stuff going on there with grid optimization. The weather plays a huge role on the capacity of the grid, how much power goes through the lines. So this is called dynamic line rating, and hyperlocal weather is super important. And the third vertical is events and sports. I'm a sports guy, you know that. We exchanged information.
You're the tennis
before.
champion of WeatherXM. Yeah.
Yeah, so events and sports is also really exciting, and we have some very good partners working on use cases around athletes' performance and protection. So this is the first pillar of our strategy, the hyperlocal revenue. So the second part is that by DNA we're a Web3 company, so we're building on chain. So this has a reason. The reason we're doing it is because we see and we have already the first indications that new weather services will happen. What I talked before is the more traditional weather industry, but we see really exciting stuff coming up. And insurance on chain is one of those. And this is our second strategy. It's a bit early right now, but it's never early to build and prove with smaller use cases that some new things are coming that can scale, and WeatherXM is the only one right now working on those use cases.
Yeah, and sometimes that stuff can take a while. So you got this long, slow burn that can be kind of maddeningly frustrating for those of us who want things right now. But it's really cool to see how long you guys have been doing that, and the range of vision that you have, because WeatherXM has been talking about insurance and on-chain interaction since almost the beginning, as far back as I remember. Okay,
that's right. That's
cool.
And the third pillar of the strategy is that we're focusing on growing the network in specific places where we see bigger demand, higher demand, and this goes regardless of local capital. Let's say we have identified the areas of South America and Africa. And we are launching very soon a whole mechanism, which is very innovative. And through this mechanism, we will be able to deploy stations in those underserved areas.
Okay, let's dive into that a little bit. I know we ran a pilot recently. We talked about that with Majeli, but walk me through how this network demand mechanism works.
Yeah, so in this mechanism, the cost basically of the weather station, the hardware, has been subsidized by users of centralized exchanges, which means that a user that wants to participate in the project, but let's say you don't have a property, you don't know where to deploy a station, but you still want to earn tokens and you like the project. Through these programs, through these campaigns, you will be able to, without a hassle of deploying a station, you will be able to earn and participate. And according to the first centralized exchange deal that we are launching very, very soon, it's predicted that we collect capital for a few thousands of stations that we will deliver to our local partners that we have in place already. And they will be the boots on the ground, that these weather stations go to the places we want, helping people that need it, and they might not be able to afford for weather services, like farmers primarily
Right.
in those areas. And at the same time, generating data that from a weather industry perspective are valuable, because there is not so much data in those places. I'm really excited on the project we're doing on the athlete side we mentioned. I can share with you that we will have 46 weather stations in the Olympic Games of Paris.
Okay.
This will happen through a collaboration with Human Telemetrics, which is a company, using sensors for athletes.
Yep.
And they will use our stations for the environmental stuff.
Okay.
And so that's cool. That's super cool, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rad to see that right out at the edge of human performance, we're seeing this interaction with kind of the edge of how this new business model is working. It's super cool to see those two things intersecting. Thanks a ton again for making the time. I know you're ultra busy. I know you got calls before, calls after. Thanos, thanks a ton for coming on.
Thank you, Nick. Great talking to you, man.